Today, we're going to be brainstorming which emotions should be dialed up or dialed down to make life worth living for the 7 billion people alive on Earth today. Sure, my anxiety, my fight or flight is like...
Face makes 7,000 different expressions. I want to use them all.
I've seen a monkey do some crazy things for a banana. I'm the only one I'm cranking down.
Would you say you're afraid to turn it up?
What would you do for
If you talk to people on ecstasy, man.
So I'm going to put a couple things out here in the ether for us to play with. So let's imagine that all three of us have some kind of a panel. I'm imagining something kind of like NASA has in front of us, or like the movie Inside Out, you know, the dial that they had that kind of controlled Riley. Imagine something like that, but it actually could affect everyone on Earth. And you're sort of this omnipotent God who sits above everyone. So if you wanted to dial up or down anger or happiness or reactiveness, surprise, all these emotions is what we're going to talk about today. You can simply dial it up or dial it down. So my first opening question is, for JP, would you change these dials to make everyone on Earth more or less like you?
Ooh, that's a very good question. That one threw me for a loop, because like if I say yes, if I say everybody should be like me, now it reminds me of the whole Catholic God thing, right? God created man in his. I'm like, ooh, I want to be God.
Yeah, but
like, who doesn't want to be God?
If you're like, no, people should be less
say no to that? Like,
but if you're like, people should be less like me and like 10% less like me.
So we're dial up the narcissism, dial
right?
down the narcissism.
Right? Actually, if I was to call this
everybody should think like I do. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, do you think the world would be better if everyone on Earth thought, 1%, 5% more like you? Or
no, if everybody thought like me and they just work 100 hours and they have no fun,
okay, so maybe dial it down a little bit?
Yeah, dial it down a little bit. Yeah.
I think I would dial it down. I want some variety in here.
You want people to be less like you on average?
I think everybody should have like a different spectrum. We need a little bit of spontaneity in the world, where it's like
you could always leave the setting to where it is. If you're like, listen, I don't think that's a good knob, maybe I'll leave that one there.
I want to walk down the street and just be surprised by people. Be like, ooh, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have said that. I mean, we wouldn't be having a conversation right now if you guys were exactly like me. I have an identical twin sister. I have an identical twin sister who thinks exactly like me.
Oh,
I don't need that.
Oh yeah, so you can dial it down just for you and your sister.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I could talk to her for days, but at the end of the day, we're not going to come to a conclusion or a debate topic and really have a debate, because we're always going to come to the same conclusion at the end of the day. So it's not as fun as if I'm going to talk to either of you guys.
Okay, so I think I will dial it up a little bit. And like, I know that can come off as like real narcissistic, so I should qualify that I'm someone who just has liked so many subjects in school. Like I loved everything. Like it was just English, math, chemistry, sports. I liked so much. I feel like if I dial it up, for me personally, I like variation, so I feel like dialing it up creates a decent amount of variety in the world, although I know that it's kind of narcissistic, because maybe other people feel that way more than me. But yeah, I'm going to say, and only at like 3 or 4 degrees, just a touch of Dylan, I think might make the world a little bit better, like 3% maybe, but not too much.
A touch of Dylan. That sounds like a cookbook.
Yeah. Touch of Dylan. In stores now. Get on Amazon.
We're going to create the USD, United States of Dylan.
Yeah, that's when you crank it up to 100, and then you're like, everyone is exactly like me. And that world would suffer in a lot of ways. If everybody was just like me.
Oh, man.
Have you ever been accused of wanting to date yourself?
We wouldn't have a lot of wars and stuff, but there would be so many aspects of life that would not work, so... A world 100%, JP? You think is that gonna go?
I'm just thinking of all the ex-girlfriends who have told me you just want to date yourself. I'm like,
well, because every girl. That's right.
World,
every girl that you went on a date with would be exactly you if you crank it up to 100. Yeah, and every guy you meet, yeah. Everyone would be a magician. Everyone would know card flourishes.
Only card flourishes. No tricks.
No. But at least none of them would ask anyone else to do a magic trick because they would all know.
Exactly.
We only
But
know.
then you
we
can't
only
do
know card
magic. Yeah,
flourishes.
we all know the trick.
It wouldn't be magic.
But
Hence, only shuffling. So just look at this flourish. Look
And
at this
see-
cardistry. It's beautiful.
See, I'm impressed by shuffling.
Yeah,
I
me
watched you
too.
do that, and now my mind was blown.
Matt, what do you think? Would you dial up the knob on more or less Matt?
I don't like the question. I feel like it's a lose-lose question.
So you just leave it alone.
Yeah, I leave it alone because if I say yes, you're gonna be like, "Oh man, Matthew's a narcissist." If I say
know.
no, I dial it down.
That's why I had to suffer through when I said,
Exactly.
dial up the Dylan. That's it. Now,
But now-
wait
now
till I
I'm-
get the comments.
I'm
you
just
know?
imagining-
I'm a
Of
hero.
course, Dylan would want to dial up the con.
Right? Of
Dial up
course.
the Dylan. Like,
Now I'm just imagining Dylan strolling up to another Dylan, like, "Hey, Dylan, look, I'm fine."
like, yo, bro, what up? And just give him the high five.
We have an anarchist in the group, somebody who's not mentally straitjacketed. He's like, "Excuse me, professor, your
Yeah.
question is dumb." Whereas everybody else is like, "We have to answer the question."
Well, and the other thing that would be wild, like if I cranked the Dylan knob up, so everybody on Earth thought exactly like me, and
Yeah.
then a year or two from now, I started reading in the news like when Dylan did this terrible thing, I'd be like, "Whoa, I'm capable of that under the right situation."
Right.
That would freak me out too, because I'd
Wait.
be like, and I'd have to be like, "What happened to that Dylan?"
But
that
now
made
you're
him-"
going into, you know how
like
the whole
because I want it, but I must be something different.
the whole
nurtured.
concept
Yeah.
of like every baby is born 100% pure or 100% the same, and then we're kind of built by our experiences, nature versus nurture. So
Yeah.
we all start off as Dylan, but then our experiences shape us into the Dylan we become.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Because I'd crank it up, and then one Dylan would go on Twitter and be like, "I'm starting a space company like Elon."
Yeah.
And I'd be like, "Why didn't I do that? I was him like 2 years ago."
Right.
Like, what happened to him to make him such a superstar?
Right, it's unfair.
Yeah. I'd be like, this guy's got the scuba diving record. This guy like won the Olympics. All the Dylans would do all sorts of stuff that would bother me.
And you know for
Oh,
a fact it'd be
jeez.
like, we're gonna discriminate against the low class Dylans and the high class Dylans.
We would never.
you don't know that. You
You
Us
definitely
Dylans,
would.
we would know. We'd have a much more representative.
from what I've
government.
seen, Dylans
I
a
mean,
bit
we would literally be a representative government the second I dialed this up.
say there was a Dylan that
Yeah.
was raised in North America and one was in South America. We discriminate because one Dylan had a stronger accent and be like, those are the lower class Dylans. So
No, you're right, because I'm imagining that the personalities would be the same, but they'd still be, you know, if somebody was started as a cook, they would know cooking, unlike
Yeah.
this Dylan that's here right now.
the tragic thing
Yeah.
about humanity is I think people always find a way to put themselves above or below somebody.
Even ourselves?
Even ourselves, yeah. I think
Oh, yeah,
we
you're right.
even just in our own heads, we always have that ability to put ourselves one up or one down. You're either, oh, that person is doing so much better than me, or I'm doing so much better than that person over there.
Jeez. All right,
For
well,
me, it's day to day. Right? For
There
me,
you
like
go.
one day I'm like, oh, I'm the best thing ever. And then the next day I'm like, oh, I suck.
like
this
the
is just-
conversation
yeah.
with yourself.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
totally
Yeah.
dependent on like how the day goes.
Right.
Exactly, too. It's not even...
You think the
Different
Dylans wouldn't do that
JPs.
to each other?
oh, no, it'd be anarchy. I'm going to dial it down. Never mind. I'm going down 10%.
Dylan versus Dylan.
No way.
Peer pressure.
But so what's interesting is now you're a product of your environment, right? So if the world is populated only by Dylans, right, the behavior is going to vary radically because of the environment, and it varies radically. And there was an awesome scientific study back when I was going to be a doctor. There was, who was it? There's somebody by the name of Samuel Morton, and I can't remember if he was the person who did the experiment or if he was the person that studied the experiment. But the whole idea was that even scientists doing everything possible to be objective cannot be objective, and they themselves are a product of their environment. And basically, the idea is there's the scientist that existed during the time of slavery and racism in the U.S., and he decided that he was going to measure the skulls of different races and figure out which one was the smartest race. So he tried everything possible. So he'd take a skull from different previously deceased human, and he'd fill it with either seeds or metal ball bearings and like try to measure the capacity. And what he actually concluded were like extremely racist things. And I can't remember the actual ranking, but of course white people were the superior ones according to his
As
findings.
the doctor was part of
Ex-
course.
right.
Yeah. Turns out I'm part of the geniuses.
Right, exactly. And now this is a famous thing that they teach, I think, all pre-med students in the United States about how even this supposedly brilliant scientist at this top university who made every effort to be objective was still a product of the environment. So in a world populated by all Dylans, we're introducing a lot of entropy that doesn't exist today.
Yeah.
I mean, you can either change your behavior to optimize for like, okay, what's going to get me that promotion? What's going to get me more resources, as opposed to like, oh, I want to go play guitar all day, right? Like, and then things like, housing prices. Like, when you think about Maslow's hierarchy, even the lowest level or two is getting harder and harder to meet, it seems like, and therefore, and I think a lot of technologists talk about societies of abundance, and maybe we'll get there, but as long as we continue to distribute resources in the way that we have been, we're not going to get there for most people. But when has this not been true in history? Right?
No, it hasn't. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, do you think we should, like, you're this omnipotent God, would you make all people more altruistic so they always felt like feeding their neighbors, and we didn't end up in a society where there's so many people without food?
Yeah, if altruism were a dial that you could turn,
yeah, it is.
Like,
that's what I'm saying. Like all these things are dials you can turn for everyone on Earth if you want.
And empathy, like altruism and empathy.
You said unnatural behavior, but it's like, I've seen a monkey do some crazy things for a banana.
You're right.
No, can you Google that? Let's see what monkeys will do for a banana.
What would you do for a Klondike bar?
Dude, that monkey's swiping right at that thing. Oh my god.
Oh wow.
Look at it.
Oh
my gosh. Like, that is a monkey you need to share.
That monkey feels no shame.
You need to
Right?
listen.
Oh, banana.
Right. You want us to be more like this?
Nom 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 nom.
Yeah, it's like, I don't care if I have to quit this job. I want my paycheck.
Right.
Did you dial up or down the overall risk profile of everyone on Earth?
Oh, 100% more risks.
More risk? The
More
society
risks.
would be better with more risk.
Yeah,
like
I mean, I was saying, I think the whole point of life is, if we're going to live forever, might as well have fun with it. So I'm saying, go bungee jumping, go skydiving.
Have that instinct to try something risky.
All of it, yeah.
Okay.
I would completely dial down that sense of danger. Obviously, we still try to survive, and we're not gonna.
Yeah, right. Not so far that it's too risky.
Yeah, but I definitely dial it
But more
down.
sacrifices on accident for more opportunities to try new things.
Especially now. I think, again, going back to the fact that you're the villain in this, we've expanded technology so much that I don't think we have a lot of studies done in the mental health community. I think a lot of kids being born now really struggle with things like anxiety and depression. And part of that is brought on by the fact that we're so exposed to technology. We know so many things going on. And we've advanced so much that we don't really need that instinct for fear as much anymore.
That's a good point. What do you think,
So might as
JP?
well
Would
tone
you
it
dial
down.
it up or down?
Oh boy.
More risk taking or less risk taking?
My
overall?
philosophy on risk taking is risk a lot to save a lot, risk nothing to save nothing. It's an old firefighter thing.
Oh, interesting.
Maybe instead of save, it's gain, right? So if you take a big risk to, with high potential reward, like, yeah, that's probably a good life. Assuming it's voluntary. And I guess then the question becomes, how hard should we make it? Like right now you have a ton of motivational speakers going, okay, life is hard. That's the way it is. You have to be harder. You have to push through. You have to be consistent. You have to put all these, you have to change your self-talk. You have to put all these sort of natural emotions away. You have to avoid self-pity. And then it's like, oh, like, yes, that makes strong people. How strong should people have to be? Or like, man, could you just turn off depression and be like, yeah, there's no more depression anymore. Like, that's not a thing.
You could. I mean, I'm going to give you that dial if you want. Yeah.
I mean, that'd be a fun dial, I think, for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, how about the dial of disgust? Would you turn it down or up on your society? You think the average person should be more disgusted in general?
By others or like by the world around us?
Yeah, the general emotion. So they might feel it just more when they see a rat, or if they get disgusted with someone burping. Like, is that good for society as a whole if that dial goes up or down?
One thing I want to clear, if we are this omnipotent God, are we just controlling people or all beings?
We're going to keep it with like Homo sapiens, but all
Homo
humans.
sapiens, gotcha.
Yeah. I know there is a certain level of theory of mind in other animals, but we'll just keep it with us.
Yeah.
I feel like disgust is a useful survival mechanism.
So crank it up a little?
Sure, why not? Because it makes good TV, if nothing else.
Okay. Because that you're optimizing for good TV.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what the society should be based on. Yeah,
Right.
I hear you. And you'd be cranking up.
No, actually, I would dial it down in that case. Well, because there's certain primal things, right? Like food poisoning seems like a useful response, right?
Right.
But
we're not saying get rid of
when
it
we're talking
altogether.
in-group, out-group things in politics. When you're disgusted by somebody who thinks differently than you tend to react in pretty bad ways, right? Or in pretty extreme ways that are probably not super good for society. And then actually, that's an interesting question. Is I guess I'd say biodiversity, but diversity in general. Like, is this important now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, how about the next dial? Would you, in your society, turn up or down the dial of surprise? So that being, a brief emotional state, either positive or negative, following something unexpected. Do you want people across the board, all 7 billion people on Earth right now, to be more reactive or less reactive to just everything?
I'm on team chill. Yeah.
You think it'd be better if the world dials it down a little bit?
So like we're talking about like unpredictable events happening, you're witnessing them, and then it's the question of like, do I react emotionally in that human way, or do I think through it and act logically and go, okay, what do I need to do to get through this and to overcome this? It's like I think we need a little bit more of that.
Okay, that's good. Yeah,
point.
Yeah.
I would. That really resonates with me too. I think I would dial surprise back a little bit, but that's also more of the way I see the world, being more safe and more working together and stuff. Sometimes I feel like when you react and act too much, you end up with those moments you regret more often. But but also those moments might bring us to places where we quickly avoid danger. And the downside is when you don't react quickly, sometimes you don't get things done, or you paralysis by analysis kind of problems.
I want to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Oh, you're going to crank it up?
I'm going to crank up both disgust and surprise.
Oh my gosh. What kind of world are you living in?
I like the idea of, you said everything's a lot more dramatic. And I'm just imagining the entire world just becomes one big sitcom.
Yeah, because everybody's like, oh my God, did you see?
Specifically a 90s sitcom. That's what I want to live in.
You're like, my face makes 7,000 different expressions. I want to use them all.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's the point if
Like
I can't use
intense
every
surprise.
single one?
It's funny.
I actually get really, really bored. I cannot go inside of a routine. And I have my own little ritual where, like, at least once a week I need to do something surprising. Like, I'll buy all those, like, mystery packs, like, compulsive buys. I'm gonna... At my job, when we choose different positions that we're going to work, we do it randomly. So we have like the little balls that say different numbers on them, and you draw randomly. And that's what I need.
Well, and I can imagine that world where you like open up the fortune cookie and you're like, oh
Exactly.
my gosh, it says I'm going to have a new dog. Or you're like, okay.
That's it.
just
If I could be an omnipotent god, I would bring magic into the world and just make everybody open a fortune cookie. That's what your day's going to be like. Just random fortune cookie of the day.
Because could you imagine everyone just being so excited and then like something bad happens, like he farted, and they're like, everyone just has to make like a big scene out of it.
Exactly.
Like, because you're cranked up that surprise gear.
The waiter brings you the wrong meal. You just have like that dramatic faint and just pass out on the couch.
Drama.
And somebody brings the couch
turning
in
up
for
the
you.
drama. Yeah.
Exactly. How fun would that be?
This is my new favorite Black Mirror episode.
I think that's a life worth living.
Yeah.
We need to create a Black Mirror episode or simulation where we live that extreme life where everything's super logical.
Yeah.
In my world.
Yeah, so I definitely know that in my world I would dial down surprise, but I would certainly watch your world on TV.
Yeah, can we visit your world?
I definitely want my TV to be like overreactive.
If we're talking about progress, your guys' makes more sense. But who cares about that?
We optimize our world. Yeah, we optimize our world for a different thing. Okay, how about the dial of anger? Do you think that the world needs more or less anger? So kind of define more as like an emotional state of hostility or frustration, because certainly being frustrated makes you, kind of change from where you are. It makes you not stay in the same place. And I don't know, it probably drives progress would be my guess. So do you think more anger and frustration would lead to a better society? Would you crank the dial up or down on your world?
I think that's got to be fine-tuned. I think because you're absolutely right. When you look at why people create things, it's never because I was so happy and things were just going really well and I thought like the world's in a good place and that's why I invented like X life-changing thing, right? And it's like no, like so I think anger at situations when channeled properly is extremely powerful, extremely useful.
So using the current world that we live in as the current setting on the dial, are you going to go up or down, and how much?
Oh man, that's a tough one because it's situational.
Yeah, this applies
Yeah.
across.
Yeah,
I mean,
right. There's only one dial.
well,
It's a very
if
coarse
you-
dial.
I could like, but I do think I reserve the power if you want to say, in one country I would turn it down, in another country I'd turn it up, or something like that, or a certain type of.
I wouldn't even
profession.
draw. What I would
Feel
do.
free to explore those ideas.
So
if you
I
want.
would tweak anger. Maybe I would dial anger up if I could also dial pragmatism up, because you have to be able to channel the anger into a useful thing.
Oh, interesting. So you want an angry but pragmatic world.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, that's a really
well,
interesting
I
combo.
actually think that-
agree
I
with-
think
I would have
that-
never thought I would crank up anger, but if you put it with, if you have that setting up too,
Yeah.
then the anger is only making the world better.
Yeah.
So there's a
But
Hulk Hogan
if
movie.
that's down, we're so screwed.
Right. No.
Then we're all angry about nothing important.
right.
And it doesn't even
absolutely.
help move us towards any good logical outcome.
So I saw this clip a long time ago, and it's about it's Hulk Hogan in this '90s movie, and Hulk's looking all big, and he does something to annoy some bikers, and he goes, "Do you know?" The biker goes, "Do you know what we're gonna do to you?" And he goes, "You're gonna pound my face," and like Hulk's clearly gonna win, and he goes, "What? No, this is the '90s. We're gonna sue you," and it's like, see, this is the whole anger thing. So like.
Like we're gonna get some money. Yeah.
Yeah, right. Well, so it's like, you can be angry, but if you then go and do the primal thing and like punch the dude in the face, like you have to understand you're probably going to lose in court later, right? Like you're probably going to jail. But like most people seem to be a little unable to think through that and go, okay,
Yeah.
don't think one move ahead, think 5 moves ahead. And so if you can turn up the anger dial, but also think 5 moves ahead
Yeah,
and go,
that's
what are we
interesting.
optimizing
Yeah.
for? I think that's a much better world for progress. Maybe not a much better world for fun, right? Like,
Yeah.
So again, now we're moving. We're going. Okay, maybe this pushes humanity forward. And same thing with the suffering, right? Like a certain amount of suffering, might be a little healthy, might be a little good, right? Or there's this concept of stress and distress, and eustress, obviously, right? So, yeah, maybe these are all related. But I don't know. Some people just want to have a good time. And
No, yeah. So I
like,
thought, because I have looked at other people and seen anger motivate them in positive ways. It's never seemed like it's fit in line with me or my goals. When I get angry, I get like less thoughtful, and usually the actions I take tend to be things that I look back on and think, oh, that wasn't really moving me in a linear direction towards a goal. So I tend to just, it hasn't worked for me. But the weird thing is I, without a doubt, have worked with people, and they've used that anger in a very, they've had it in this sort of controlled way that's been very productive. Even in sport, I'll see like in sports, sometimes it seems, maybe in that's one case where sometimes I've been playing basketball and get kind of angry, but it's like, because I kind of know like I need to get that ball in the hoop. It's just very like, okay, it's just boom, just do that, and I'm angry about it. But in complex thinking, anger is usually clouded
Right.
my judgment.
right. Can you have rock and roll in a world without anger?
Exactly.
You will.
Are you
probably
trying to
have-
get rid of
well,
rock
you're
and
gonna
roll,
have-
Dylan?
Well, pragmatic anger will make pragmatic rock music.
When
so
you
I think
started-
you're gonna have like
Which is
some-
different than prog rock.
So I think they're gonna be very like logical about what they're angry about. But yeah, it seems like you can still have rock music.
When you started going into that Hulk Hogan story, my mind went immediately to Fight Club.
Yeah.
Do you guys know that scene where they're like, hit me, and then he hits him in the ear, and he's like, oh, why the ear? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
See, that's acting impulsively with anger, and look what happened. They formed Fight Club, and it was a great
was
movie.
beautiful.
It was. Has anything productive ever happened without anger? Think about like civil rights movements. None of that would have happened if people hadn't gotten angry.
Oh,
Even
when it
peaceful
breaks through the
people.
street.
Martin Luther King Jr. was angry. Gandhi was angry. They just did it in a more productive way. So I think I'd kind of go in your direction, where I would amp up anger, but the way we express it, I would change. So
Okay.
keep it in that more controlled.
Yeah, but I mean, I agree with you, but I also don't know if that's like the optimal way to run a society. So the example I have, I totally agree with you. And the example I had was women's suffrage, and somebody's like, "Hey, look at women have been voting for like so many years now," and I'm like, "Yeah, but none of those votes have made as big of a difference as the stuff they had to pull to get the right to vote in the first place." And
Right.
So it's like, and when you look at how society responds, even democratic societies, it's like, oh, when you have thousands of angry people in the streets with torches and pitchforks, change happens real quick. When you vote, especially in our current political climate, not so much, right?
Right.
So
Yeah, from that point of view too, I was saying, I don't know if anger has really moved me towards a lot of things that I've thought were good goals, but I guess my fear of other people being angry with me maybe has too. So I haven't really thought about it from that, because my fear of not angering someone has made me think, hey, what would make them angry? Maybe I should do something else to get to whatever I want. So maybe anger has like a knock-on effect or a second level effect could be.
I could go out and kill someone right now, but then the police would be kind of angry with me. So I probably shouldn't.
So we'll definitely have less murders in Maggie's world.
There you go.
Yeah. How would you dial the sadness up or down, being an emotional state characterized by the feelings of disappointment, grief, hopelessness? Do you think it's better or worse for the world to crank up or down sadness? And if so, what percentage or...
Yeah, aside from a few select pieces of artwork, I don't think it's a particularly useful emotion.
You think?
That's it? You're just gonna say no?
I'm gonna dial it down, right? Yeah, I see no reason to dial it up, right? So like anger, different story, right? Maybe even disgust. There's a whole host of emotions where maybe it's a different story. Sadness, despair, that sort of thing. I don't see the utility.
If Inside Out has taught me anything, it's that sadness is very important.
So a funny story. I'm reading Susan Cain's new book, Bittersweet, and it's interesting you bring that up because their rough draft of the final product for Inside Out had anger as the main character. They made the conscious decision to move sadness into the main role because it seemed to create that bittersweet version of what makes a show or sometimes a melancholy song so powerful. And that's usually the kind of combination of the sadness and then the thought of how can I turn this into joy. So there's a weird dichotomy between like joy and sadness that they couldn't find with joy and anger. And it just didn't work as well in the script. And they think there's some psychology behind that. Personally, I would dial it maybe up a little bit, and I'll tell you why in a minute. But I wanted to hear your thoughts about a couple facts from studies. People tend to be better at recalling items they saw in a store on cloudy days. People who are in bad moods tend to remember more details from car accident videos.
Well, I know there's the notion that, like if you don't have sadness, how can you then have joy, right? Because two sides of the same coin.
So if you dial it down, do you think you've also dialed down the potential joy in your society?
If you talk to people on ecstasy, man, I'm like, they're pretty good at getting one without the other.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point there.
Well, can we disambiguate so that's actually interesting that the human brain works that way, right? So I actually didn't know that.
And we're defining the basic way they define the emotion is a kind of a cross between disappointment, grief, hopelessness. So I definitely, those three words do seem like they're not the same kind of sadness you might experience from Inside Out's character.
Right. And I guess, being sad, like feeling a little bit blue, in the way we normally think of it is different than like deep crushing depression. Right. So, sadness, I understand, can improve memory, and maybe there are some benefits there, but it'd be cool to be able to disambiguate that the memory, the good memory, and the brain. And I think technology will get us there eventually. That said, when you look at all the really great technology and art and the reasons that we make progress, nobody ever makes progress because things are pretty good and I feel pretty chill right now and like I'm comfortable. Like it's not why people push themselves to do great things, right? So maybe sadness is useful for that.
What about the fact that more artists than would be expected in a population sample are either people who have had are orphans or have had trauma in early childhood? Do you think that plays into your idea of where the sadness style should be? I mean, do you think you might be taking away some of the artistic value on the planet if you pull that down?
You'd be taking away large quantities of art. Is it valuable? That's another question.
Dang, man.
I know, right? Okay, and this is really interesting because if you probably my all-time favorite band is Nine Inch Nails, right?
Okay.
And man, when I go back and listen to that early Nine Inch Nails, it's like so angsty and whiny, and I'm like, but when I was 18, when I was 16, it felt absolutely amazing. I was like, oh, this is it, right? Yeah, exactly. And I'm like, oh yeah, like it is part of the human condition. It's good to express it and to deal with it. But like if we didn't have that, would be like, if we could just turn that off, wouldn't that be awesome, right? As opposed to like a comedy magic show.
Exactly.
Like there's nothing negative about most of them. I mean, even Dan Sperry is hilarious, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, like I don't know.
Yeah, it's really, it is hard to describe, but I just feel personally, just the way Dylan is wired, I sit better with sadness. Like I expect to feel sad at certain times. I feel like I just know how to kind of handle it and how to guide it. And for me, it just feels like a better emotion for me to have than anger or other ways to deal with something bad happening to me. Like when something out of nowhere happens, I'm probably less likely to just get upset and angry about it, but more to just feel sad and then say, okay, this ebbs and flows in my life, and I'm okay with feeling this way for a minute. So I personally would dial probably up sadness on my society, a few percentage,
because you know how to handle it, because you know how to use it.
Yeah,
and
but,
you know how to
I am making a judgment on everyone on Earth, and they might totally like. I'm taking a guess here how the world would be, but certainly that might be the wrong move. I'm just taking my guess on it.
I want to agree with Dylan, and I feel like an absolute horrible person because I think I've been saying yes to all these emotions. Just dial it up, dial it up, dial it up.
Dial everything up.
I think my
She's
society,
100% here.
I think my society is completely unstable at this point, but we're gonna ignore that. The reason I dial it up is I think at least when it comes to entertainment, because I love the entertainment field. That's like my primary thing in life. Most of my most positive experiences with that involve some kind of sadness. My favorite movies, my favorite stories are the ones that have made me cry. And so I would dial up sadness mostly just because of the empathy element. And I think that's what's very important. Just how we can empathize with others. And I think that just makes a better society if we could like jump into somebody else's skin and know what that feels like, know what that sadness feels like. But I think I also want to make the distinction between sadness and depression.
Oh, for sure.
I think those are completely different things. And one thing that isn't talked a lot about, especially in the mental health community, is depression a lot of times is presented as numbness and indifference.
Yes.
So if we were to amp up sadness, wouldn't that, in theory, help decrease depression because it would make people more emotionally open?
Oh. It maybe, I don't know.
That makes a lot of sense.
What do you got for us, Matt?
I was gonna say bring it up or bring it down like JP, but she kind of convinced me because there is a difference between depression, because you're kind of like in this different, from what I've heard about depression and mental health, it's very, very different from sadness. Sadness is an actual feeling, while depression, you're kind of in a limbo state.
Yeah.
So honestly, increasing sadness won't also increase depression too.
Yeah, I think indifference is the real tragedy.
Exactly. So yeah, she convinced me. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm dialed up.
No, depression. Yeah.
That's my new favorite T-shirt.
Yeah.
Well, I've always heard that there's like an immune system thing where if you actually feel sick, you kind of want to be alone, which makes sense from a society point of view, where if we were in tribes or something like that and you had something that was contagious, you'd probably
isolate yourself.
Probably good if your emotional state changes so that you want to go into the forest and be alone or not be around people, because whether you know it or not, that could be an evolutionary thing from being contagious.
And emotions are kind of contagious too.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, how many times have you walked into a room? I mean, that's what's interesting about dialing up the whole planet, is that we don't even know the knock-on effects of, well, we're going to talk about joy here in a second, but I guess, yeah, if you just cranked up joy 10%, probably even the people who are already 10% up will walk into rooms more often and have joy more. So that probably will go up quite a bit more than the 10% on the dial. Okay, so let's talk about happiness. What do you guys think about the happiness dial? I feel like I put JP on the spot last time, so I'll let Maggie go first. Would you crank it up, down? If so, how much? So a pleasant emotional state that elicits feelings of joy, contentment, and satisfaction. And this would be generally across the board. Do people just walk around feeling more satisfied, more content?
I've been having a lot of fun playing devil's advocate a little bit. So I want to keep doing that. And I'm going to say, let's crank that down.
Crank it down.
That's going to be the only one I'm cranking down.
World, it's all high drama. Everyone reacts to everything.
Super high drama. If I'm still going with my beautiful sitcom utopia, how often are people in sitcoms just super happy?
Well, okay.
Where's the drama and all that?
So you cranked up the sadness, and now you're cranking down the happiness?
I'm cranking up every emotion but joy. Just because, doesn't that make joy a lot more special? When you get to feel it, It's just so much better.
I mean, it probably would
that's
make.
a key point, by the way.
I'm trying to think about what's bad about it. Yeah.
I've never
Yeah.
understood happiness. I
Oh.
genuinely do not understand what happiness means. Like I
Have you
feel
felt
like
happy?
no. I mean, I feel like I genuinely feel like I haven't, because people think happiness is like this sustainable state that you can. And it's like maybe there are some drugs that will help you with this for a short period of time. But I mean, legit, like that's the only way that's the only metaphor I can think of. But I think the correct goal is moments of joy, and like Woz has a really good formula for it. He says, oh man, I cannot remember it.
You can look that up, Matt. You have Steve Wozniak's formula for
Yeah,
joy.
so Woz said happiness is smiles minus frowns. And
Oh man,
super simple, right?
Yeah.
But like, man, a smile is this little moment of joy. It's fleeting. It's going away real soon. So treasure it while you have it, and then hopefully you can make another one happen and another one. But
Yeah.
also to your point, I think the relationship between these moments of joy and sadness matters. The deltas matter. Like your brain always cares about deltas. So one thing without the other doesn't matter so much.
Yeah, realistically, one weird thing about all these dials is because the body wants to and the brain always want to even out. We might not even be able to do this because it would just even everyone out. But okay, so what could the possible downsides? Let's brainstorm. Like what a world that's less or more happy. What if they're more happy? Are they less productive? Do you think?
Right, and like that's actually I think of
They're just
a
more
major
like
issue.
I just want to sit on a couch and be.
Yeah. I mean, does happiness mean contentness?
Yeah, I think in this definition we actually said that. Yeah, so
Yeah.
contentment, joy, and satisfaction they're all going up when you turn up our happiness dial.
Gotcha.
So one of my entrepreneur friends would say, "Yeah, I'm happy, but I'm dissatisfied," and I'm like, ooh. I always thought that was pretty prolific.
Yeah.
So what would you do with your dial?
The happiness style,
The JP
boy,
world.
the JP world.
Yep.
I mean, I want to turn it up. Just
You
just
turn
now
it
to
up?
spite you.
Yeah.
What's your percent? Do you feel like it's you got to be careful with it, or do you feel
maybe
like
maybe the correct definition for happiness is how many moments of joy you can have per unit of time, and it seems like no reason to not crank that up.
Okay, so
Yeah.
you might go pretty heavy. You think?
Yeah,
More.
yeah, yeah.
What percentage would you put? 50%, 100%, 20%?
What are we at right now?
Well, the world as we know it is the baseline of 0.
Oh, we could
And
double
you
it.
can
We could go
down-
100%, no problem.
You can go down. You can go
that'd
down.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you can go down 100% or up 100% on every dial here. How much did you crank yours down?
I don't know.
Because you could do it just a tad, and like, okay, it might just make people a little more
Okay.
on it or whatever. But if you want, since you're going for like kind of a comedy planet,
Oh yeah, we're full on. We're going full on sitcom.
I
So
feel like you're going down.
yeah, if we're using 90s sitcoms as a reference point here, whatever best emulates that, that's how much I'm cranking it down.
Okay.
Now, are
20%, I
we
don't
altering the actual like? So happiness is a product, right? Or moments of joy are a product, right? So there's determinants of that, right? And are we altering those? Or are we just going? Oh,
and
everybody can be happy with what they have. I mean, it's like
Yeah, they would be getting just a higher sense of happiness out of whatever they're doing now. They're
Okay.
just, yeah, we're not affecting all those aspects. Just their natural baseline is going to go up, and they're going to react to happy things more often or in greater quantities.
Yeah, I think generally that's probably a
Okay.
good thing. Yeah.
How much percent?
Oh,
wanna
like you said,
quantify it?
to see
Yeah.
that. So like if it's 0 to 100, like yeah, we could easily double. We could go higher than 100, I think.
Ooh,
a lot of
wow.
people.
Higher
Yeah,
than
yeah.
100?
Yeah, yeah, we could.
Okay, you feel good about that. Yeah, I
In
definitely
Silicon Valley, we 10x things, right?
be like, we need to, break this knob and kick it up a notch. So I would, I think I would. I mean, I was trying to think of the downside of happiness, and like maybe laziness came to mind, but I don't know what else really would. Yeah, so I think I'll crank. I'm not gonna crank up happiness. I feel like
Just turn it up a tad.
I'm just gonna turn it up. Like I'm gonna turn it not even like you're 100 and you're down 20% or something. So I'll probably go.
I
up
might
5 or
have to turn
10%.
it up if I'm including a laugh track.
Oh, so you can be happy about all the reactions.
So that people
highly
can have
reactive
so
people?
people can have reactions. Because
And they're all
every good sitcom needs a laugh track, right?
All right, so for this one, we'll ask JP first. So on the knob that's titled fear, which we're going to define as a primal emotion that is important to survival, so it'll trigger the fight or flight response. That's the main thing that we're putting on the context of this button, fight or flight response under fear, would you crank the dial up or down? How much, and what's your thoughts behind why you would do that?
Boy, fear's a tricky one for me. It's very, very double-edged. There's an awesome book called The Gift of Fear, and fear can be tremendously useful.
Has it helped you get to? You're pretty successful. Has it helped you get to where you are in life? Like, do you think it's
Oh,
good for the average
absolutely.
person?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for a lot of people, like, I think for a lot of young men, fear of becoming their father or fear of something drives them forward, even if it's fear of just being out on the street, right? I think fear is powerful and very useful.
Do you think,
crank it up for the society?
I'd say crank it up a little.
do you think there's any gift to fear in your current field right now?
Right now?
Yeah, in your work. How does that help you?
Yeah, you should probably tell people you build spaceships.
I
right?
build spaceships.
And making the smallest error, everyone's like, "Oh, they messed up."
Yeah,
you gotta. That's gotta be scary.
And the amount of money it can cost. I mean, is fear driving?
So experiencing fear and reacting to fear are different things. And so I think whenever you're trying something big, I think actually feeling fear is a healthy thing as long as you have the correct response. If you have fear and then don't have the correct response in any situation, it's going to end up badly for you. So it's useful to the extent that you can manage it.
But this is kind of a dumb dial because it's just going to affect all 7 billion people on the planet equally. So we can't say like, oh, give fear to the people who are smart. So you could leave it alone, not touch it if you don't.
I don't know if it's about smart so much as just training, right? Just learning how to handle. I mean, and there's a whole bunch of like I'm thinking about maybe it's the wrong thing, but I'm thinking about like a child when they touch the stove for the first time and learn very quickly. Like, I don't know if they become afraid of stoves for the rest of their lives, not particularly useful. If they adapt and go, oh, like shouldn't touch it when it's hot, should do something else.
Yeah.
Maybe it's more useful. But
and it seems like almost like built into our DNA. There's like fear of like public speaking and heights. Like it's weird how that stuff seems to just manifest everywhere. So I'm sure those would be turned up with this dial.
Exactly.
But also learned fears would be a whole nother layer to what you're changing in the society.
Fear of being rejected by your tribe is probably useful, particularly further back in time. But I mean, even now, like nobody's a silo. So
yeah.
And you've brought up working as a firefighter in the past,
yeah.
Saving lives. How does that help with? How does fear help in that?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're not afraid of it, you're like, people might die.
For sure.
Maybe.
Fun story about that. I'm absolutely terrified of heights, and for most people, I think when they call their parents and say, "Mom, I'm going to be a firefighter," their parents are probably like, "Yay!" Right? My mom was like, "You know you're afraid of heights, right?" She goes, "Are you like? What are you doing?" So the first time I was up on a ladder that was 3 stories tall. I'm on a roof. And this was a training building. The training building was on a hill. So now I'm like looking down the hill and I'm like, oh my God. And I remember thinking, wait, I should be terrified right now. I should be absolutely petrified. I should be freaking out, and I'm not. And it's because I had a job to do. And it's like, no, you have to cut a hole in this roof. And it's like, because I had a job to do, I didn't care about.
So your fight or flight didn't kick in the way it normally would, because
right. I mean,
it was overpowered by the goal that you had.
Exactly. And I'm like, oh, and it's like all of a sudden I was able to, and then, but on the flip side, I've been in a burning building with somebody who absolutely froze solid. We got into we got to the second story of a building that was on fire, 0 visibility. We had a hose. I was behind him. He was the first person on the nozzle, and he just froze, just absolutely freaked out. And this was a training fire, but clearly a fear response. Clearly not a good thing, not a good situation, and. That was a tough evolution, right?
Gosh,
to see that. So not particularly useful.
Tricky one.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so easy for me to think of both sides of this. Like, I know, like, defensive driving, I should be like, yeah, it's good to be fearful. Like, don't just get in a car and not have those feelings that you could die. But then on the other hand, I'm also equally aware that the fear has definitely driven a lot of the regrets. Like, I'm like, why didn't you try that? Or why didn't you do that or say that? And I walk away thinking like, oh, the opportunity's gone now, and you could have helped you. Or like when I want some people to be on the podcast, but I get nervous to ask them, and then I'm like, you should have just done it. Like, why'd you get so scared? So in that case, I want to turn down the fear. And then when it comes to a lot of physical things, I'd like to turn it up. So as far as like an entire society goes, I think I'm not going to touch that dial. I think I'll just leave it where it is because I can't clearly see an advantage either way.
Interesting. I'm turning that up.
You're going to turn up fear?
I'm turning up fear.
Would you say you're afraid to turn it up?
Yeah.
You're afraid to turn it up.
Yeah, for sure. My anxiety, my fight or flight is like through the roof. Yeah.
I think
That'd be scary about that one because as soon as I dialed it down, then I'd feel less fearful and then I'd want to turn it back up. So we'd probably end up in the same place.
Exactly. But like thinking about it, I think we find out a lot about ourselves through our fear.
For the self-discovery standpoint.
I'm being in the performing arts field. Coming from that, I've been with a lot of different people who are terrified of that kind of stuff and are terrified by the reaction, like say of your mentor and like letting people down, and you realize, no, this just isn't for me. And then you kind of find out where you belong, where you feel comfortable. And if you do feel that fear, if you get past it, there's always that pride associated with it. And that's that motivator and that drive. And I think a lot of us need that drive to sort of keep going. If we didn't have the fear, if we didn't have anything to push past.
Because I feel like it's a general pattern that most people are becoming more fearful.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Generation Z.
Yeah, they have, anxiety. Do you think anxiety is the same as fear? Or do you feel like that shouldn't be grouped? It's probably, we're talking about fight or flight. So
They're different.
maybe I would dial it
they
down
can
a
be
little bit.
subcategories of
I
each
feel like
other.
they're separate though. So
I don't know anybody who wouldn't be like, yeah, we should dial that anxiety thing down a lot.
Yeah.
that's true. Oh yeah. So where would you, on the anxiety dial, we're all in a consensus. Maybe that could go down a little bit.
Yeah, even I'm not going to turn that one up.
in your society, or just and they're all anxiety. They're all like, and then they all laugh really easily.
Yeah.
So.
Anxiety is, I think, a lot more debilitating. Fear is fun when you can move past it.
Anxiety is like this general level of just like high cortisol, can't sleep. It feels very weird. Like
anxiety is very personal.
It's like a baseline. It feels like a baseline issue.
Yeah, it's a very personal thing. Fear, I feel, can be a lot more collaborative, and that's what makes it interesting.
Well, I feel like, anxiety disorder is different from regular feelings of anxiety. I think there's many times where I feel like, I'm very anxious about the situation. But when I actually do it, it kind of, that anxiety helped me achieve to whatever goal I was very anxious about.
Mm-hmm. But anxiety in general, I think, is more of an internal feeling where I think it's developed from a survival instinct where it's, I'm anxious about the situation because there might be a predator, and it's kind of how you're going to survive and how you're going to protect yourself. Fear feels like a collective thing of something that everyone inherently knows.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
You see it that way?
I'm actually thinking about what is the difference between anxiety and nervousness. So I have a thing before I go on stage, before I talk to a group of people, as a people leader at my company, I get uncontrollably nervous. And I'm not afraid. I'm like, I'm not afraid to be standing up here in front of you, but I have all this energy. And then I either talk really fast uncontrollably, or my voice cracks, or I do not come off like the person that I want to be. And I have no control over it. And that lack of control just pisses me off. And I'm like, I'm not afraid.
But it seems like that happens to most of us.
Right.
Why would evolution have ever gave us that? It seems just like to throw it.
Seems useless, right?
Yeah, kind of.
Right.
Especially now.
You can't rally people in your tribe. You can't get your point across. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's so weird. I'd probably dial that one. I don't know what that is, but I guess in this case, fear we're saying is fight or flight. So probably dialing that down would maybe help people communicate better or get.
But I don't feel like it's fight or flight. It's not like I'm running away from the group. It's not like I'm going to fight them all or something, or even myself. But but it's. I'm not even sure what that is, but to me, it's nervousness. It's like, there's this energy in my body that I cannot control, and I absolutely hate that feeling. And I actually wonder how performers deal with that. How do you theater people handle that?
I mean, all of it is just energy. Like, your mental energy is just going into physical, because it is like a fight or flight. You just want to get all of that energy out by doing physical
jumping
work.
Jacks.
Yeah, doing jumping jacks or something. So you figure out a way to channel that in a different way. I always imagine it like heat in the pit of your stomach.
Oh, okay.
And just like putting it in one place, and it sort of like expands through you, and that gives you that energy. And you can, it's all it is like nervous energy, but at the end of the day, energy is energy. So you just channel it into something more positive.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like just doing it a lot would probably help. I'm not an expert at it, but it just seems like your brain gets reference material that like, hey, you've given a talk 20 times and nobody's killed you after, so probably this one will be fine too, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
What about other dials besides those major emotions? What other dials would you want to add to your board?
Ooh, creativity for me.
Creativity would
interesting.
I'd probably just crank up, I'm guessing. And if so,
So I wonder,
how much?
I'm super curious about this. I wish I had data on this.
Or turn it. Imagine a world where you turned it down all the way.
Ah.
Though that would be like one of those weird
You
movies.
think at Wisconsin? Never mind. Oh, no, we should cut that.
Or you know the movies where people just become like robots and they factory workers, and that's better for different, you know.
Have you guys read that one short story? I can't for the life of me remember the name of it, but they made it so that everyone has different handicaps, so that everybody's on the same physical level and mental level. So people who were way too creative, who like were above the average, they would get a mental handicap where they would restrict their creativity or their mental process.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of, we have the dial, I guess.
Exactly, is that what we're doing?
Because creativity is kind of like different, two ideas kind of coming together, rethinking something.
Right.
Long distance connections.
I don't know. I have always operated under the assumption that all humans want to be creative, and that's an innate desire, an innate trait of humans.
It does feel right, like flow state and...
Yeah, exactly.
So how far up would you crank this thing? 100% again?
Yeah, probably pretty high. Probably, yeah.
So we'd have a world of probably everyone would be a poet, and everybody would love abstract thinking, and lots of people would work on passionate projects that may or may not result in lots of money.
So are you saying that creativity can't be expressed in a logical way, like say technology and advancement like that?
Oh no, it can be. I mean, I know as when I'm programming, I've been able to get into a flow state before. I'll have it in my head like a function I wrote a long time ago, and I'll kind of know how it interacts and what kind of variables you put in and out. And then later down the road, I'll be like, oh my God, that variable could just go in there. And then I just delete all that. And I'll just have this totally euphoric moment. And I'm just sitting there and it's nothing. It's not paint. It's not anything beautiful, I guess, to other people. But
I mean,
I've had that. It's rare, but it feels great.
When I look at different people who work in the tech industry, say camera operators, that is so, or photographers, that's so creative, like being able to just see an image, be able to frame it properly and get your point across. It's super technical, it's super logical, but it's like the peak of creativity.
Yeah, describe, what do you think is going to happen when you crank this up? How do you think society will change?
So I'm actually concerned about it, right? So actually that's really an interesting point about camera operators, but because I'm thinking, cinematography, like the first time I saw Breaking Bad, I was like, oh my God, this is wow, just phenomenal. That said, camera operator, different game, right? Yeah. So it's like, oh, that could be a robot. Oh man, there's like half of Hollywood is going to be like at my door now. I'm like,
get out.
Sorry guys,
get away from JP.
Exactly. Maybe there's this innate desire to be creative, and for pragmatic reasons or like economic reasons, people are not allowed to be creative already. And if we dial up the desire to be creative without dialing up the means for people to be creative, it would be a problem. So for me, I have a
that's
weird...
what we'd be doing with this knob. We're not giving them more time or...
So maybe we'd get
tools.
chaos. Maybe we'd get discontentment. Maybe, but again, if we're just picking... Are we picking things in isolation, or are we building a world? Because if I've already adjusted happiness... and if I'm...
That's true. So do you think a lot of people, all of a sudden you dial up creativity, and a lot of people who are working fairly mundane jobs or kind of conveyor belt style jobs would all of a sudden be like, look, I need to quit. Like, my life's worth something and I'm not feeling fulfilled.
Oh man, that's my favorite thing about the Great Resignation. But think of LA right now. So LA is filled with people. Like, I was in an elevator in Hollywood, and this food delivery guy was in the elevator with me, and he's pitching me his movie, and I'm like, well,
okay.
but he's
Be like-
he's yeah, exactly, and I'm like, but he can't make his movie, right? Because he doesn't make the money, so he feels like his soul's been crushed because he's delivering food,
Yeah.
not making this movie, and so he's telling everybody that he can. I'm a complete stranger. I've never met this person before, and in
I wish you
literally,
were like,
it's
"Yeah,
a
I'll
literal
fund that."
elevator pitch, right? And I'm like, wow, but he's so creative and so unable to achieve his goals, and I felt, and everybody, and I'm not everybody,
Yeah.
but a lot of people in LA are like that. Half of like, there's so much talent in that city that is not going to get to fulfill their dream, and it's just like,
and especially in the
whoa.
worst case, when it finally gets up to the top, creativity is not even the primary thing. They're like, no, we need another Marvel movie.
Right.
That's what makes money.
Right.
And they're like, oh,
Okay,
you know
okay.
what I mean?
We're not saying Marvel movies aren't creative.
No, they're good.
We
But I'm
need to
saying
put
not
that
saying
in the
there's
that.
air.
certainly
Oh.
to greenlight these kind of creative projects.
Right.
It's hard
Yeah.
to, I mean, there are, creativity without making money has just always been one of those tricky things, you know? Like
Yeah.
sometimes it gets off the ground, but more often than not, it gets stalled.
And your vision's going to be altered depending
Yeah,
on
I mean,
how.
and imagine you're a parent and your kid's like, oh, I want to devote my life to like, street art or something. And you're like, oh, I don't know. Are you sure? Like,
Yeah.
As a tech person in the Bay Area, I might have heard of this issue. Like, yeah.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Okay, so
Yeah.
you crank it up, but sparingly or quite a bit still? Now that we've talked through.
All right, maybe sparingly. Yeah, maybe. See, I have a thing. I have a personal vendetta against white drywall boxes. And
well, you just don't want houses to look all square.
yeah, right, exactly. And
That's where this all stems from. Yeah.
and what I noticed
So if
though,
there was a dial for straight edges or curves, you'd say
oh
curves.
yeah, curves, like absolutely, and like textures and not landlord white paint. Like yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And I wonder, I genuinely wonder when I look around, New York, San Francisco, I'm like, how do people choose to live like this? And it's because they're given no choice, really. They just take what's there and they're like, okay, this is the world and I'm living in it. And I mean, this is why I think one of the reasons people do video games and VR and things like that is to escape this.
Escape that.
Because they have no control over their physical surroundings. And I'm like, oh, so I would like to see people improve their physical space and live in more inspiring spaces. And I've kind of thought, oh, is this purely economic, or is this because people actually, other than me, don't care about a white drywall? So again, this is fine. Like, it doesn't bother them in the same way that it bothers me. And I'm like, oh, so again, it's kind of like, would I want to live in a world of more JPs? Like, am I just imposing my values on the rest of the planet, right? Like,
Yeah, come visit Dylan World. Rule.
Yeah.
See, then you'll be the one JP. We'll be like, what is with that guy? That'd be great. You come by.
The rest
All
of
right.
us are still Dylans.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to visit me and come be on this podcast. I love these conversations. JP, I've always really valued conversations with you. Every time it feels like you take me to thoughts I've never had before. So thanks for pushing me to think that way.
absolutely. Good to be here. Thank you.